We have received a drastic increase in phone calls from parents and family members about tragic loss due to fentanyl overdose death. After our conversation on episode 24 with Dr. Laura Berman, whose son Samuel lost his life to a pill he purchased on Snapchat, we were left heartbroken and passionate about finding or creating a real solution to this problem. We connected Dr. Berman with our episode 9 guest, Titania Jordan, Chief Parent Officer at Bark Technologies, and they, along with others, came up with #LetParentsProtect, a petition for Snapchat, TikTok, and other social media platforms to urge them to allow parents to use third-party monitoring tools like Bark to protect children online. The petition argues that in order to save lives, parents need to be the ones who make the choice about whether they want to use third-party safety apps, and we couldn't agree more. Today on The Balanced Voice, we welcome Dr. Berman and Titania Jordan back to the podcast, along with Dr. Berman's husband, Samuel Chapman, Mark Berkman, the CEO of the Organization for Social Media Safety, and Roger Crystal, CEO of Opiant Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and the founder of Narcan Nasal Spray. We discuss the need for better regulations on social media and the dangers of fentanyl. We beg every single one of you to go to the link in our show notes to sign the petition and #LetParentsProtect. Without further ado, here's your host, Brenya Mankarios.
Welcome to this very special edition of the Balanced Voice podcast. We're joined today by a few guests we've had before and two new guests for a really, really important conversation. With us is Dr. Laura Berman, leading love relationship expert, and her incredible husband, Samuel Chapman. Titania Jordan, CMO and CPO, Chief Parent Officer. I love the title of Bark. And then new to the program is Mark Berkman, ED at Organization for Social Media Safety, and Roger Crystal, founder and creator of Narcan Nasal Spray. Welcome, everybody, to the Balanced Voice.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we have all come together really based on the story of Laura and Samuel Chapman. It was a story that stopped me in my tracks after Super Bowl Sunday. One that I know Titania stopped you in your tracks, and Mark the same. Let's just do a quick synopsis of what happened. Laura, you've been on the podcast before. Tell us, Laura and Samuel, tell us what happened that day.
Well, unfortunately, our 16-year-old son, who was getting ready to apply to colleges and a great student and a great kid, passed away tragically from what was ultimately fentanyl poisoning. So he had ordered through Snapchat, a dealer on Snapchat who had connected with him. He ordered a delivery of drugs to experiment with. We're still waiting for the toxicology reports to come back, but he went out after we were asleep and met the dealer, and then a few days later decided to take what he took, and then I found him gone.
You have talked about the fact that, we know you, obviously, we've known you for a long time. You and Samuel had 3 boys, lived sort of the normal all-American life in California, lockdowns, at home, the boys home, everybody's just home.
Yes.
You've mentioned in the past that obviously this loss was beyond tragic. There's no discussion or question around that. But the reality of one of the things you said sticks with me. You think as a parent, what are the kids really doing online that can really hurt them? At most, they're looking at bad pictures, maybe pornography. I mean, it can't be that bad. I mean, you guys have talked about the fact that this has opened you up to a whole new world. Sam, you've talked about, and you've said some really compelling things, this whole new world of what's undercover and really happening in the online world.
That's right. And Snapchat and TikTok are where our kids are, and they provide the least protection against this sort of thing. What we now know is that there's software out there that can really help parents stay in tune with what their kids are up to online. but the places where our kids actually hang out online don't allow it. And particularly with Snapchat, the kids are on there because the screen disappears and they think they can do anything on there. And so that's pooled them all. During this pandemic, you put a multiplier effect on the hours they spend online. And there's a central place where criminals are finding our children. And so we need protections. We need new techniques for how to integrate this into our families and prevent harm to our kids, which is why we brought these people on with us as guests, because Mark can tell you some of the tricks of the trade, and Titania can tell you how to put on the software that can save your kid's life. And we didn't know about these things beforehand.
Nor did we know that. I had no idea. It didn't even occur to me that drug dealers or pornographers or pimps were preying on our kids there. Like you said, Rania, the worst I was worried about was naked pictures or saying something inappropriate, which we talked to them about incessantly. But I had no idea that they would be targeted on those platforms.
Titania and I work in a similar space, and Chief Parent Officer, again, my most favorite title at Bark. Titania, we talk about Bark all the time because platforms are there. Our kids live their lives on them. That's just a fact. And parents care, but a lot of parents, don't fully understand what's going on. Or if they're trying to keep up, okay, this is the newest technology. I don't even understand how to open the app on my kid's phone. You guys step in with this technology that helps parents monitor. Talk to us about Bark and what you guys are doing. And then I want to talk to you about what you've been seeing in the online world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for all of your work to raise awareness and to help prevent crime and to help protect families. It's definitely it's not easy. So thank you. When it comes to Bark, we are a tech company that helps to protect over 5 million children across the nation. And our tech is trusted by over 2,800 school districts across the nation. So we definitely have a strong footprint. And from that footprint, we see a lot of anonymized data. And before I speak about that data, in terms of what Bark does and how it helps your family, most kids have access to some sort of device, whether it's a family device or their own personal device. And Bark will alert you when your child has encountered dangers across texting, social media, email, and a variety of other platforms, and will also help to monitor screen time and filter it so you don't even come across the tough stuff. And so that's what it does from a technical level. In terms of how it works, we use artificial intelligence to scan. And we're not just looking for keywords, the obvious keywords like marijuana, Percocet. It's not that basic. It's much more involved. And we are analyzing conversational nuance. We're not just analyzing text, we're analyzing emojis, pictures, photo, video. There's so much that goes into the way that children communicate these days. It's much different than the way adults communicate. And we're able to analyze all of that. And in terms of not just leaving you with the problem, because there's plenty of problems, we give you best recommended next steps along with the issues that we send so that you can take action, because it's not easy.
It never ceases to amaze me how much is evolving online at all. It's minute by minute. And we step back, and I think Laura and Samuel have been talking about this, how, and because of their story, more parents are waking up to what's going on. And the question becomes, how on a platform where it's known, it's used by millions of kids. Is it a free-for-all? Is a predator, a drug dealer, a trafficker able to interface so easily with our children? And why are the laws not where they need to be? Mark, this is sort of your background. This is what you've been looking at. Why aren't the protections there legally? You have Bark stepping in and doing an incredible job. Our organization we're talking to kids every day, but ultimately I don't feel a lot of support through our legislators or legislatively. What's going on?
It's an excellent question. It's a complex answer, and this is part of the reason that the Organization for Social Media Safety exists. We do advocacy at all levels of government. The difficulty with social media is one, that it's new, and legislation and government, as we all know, whether or not you're actively involved in politics, it moves slowly, unfortunately, and it's not keeping pace with the changes and the dangers that our families are confronting on social media. Two, another difficulty in this area is that typically when you're trying to legislate here, social media works through speech. So there's a big First Amendment issue that we have to legislate creatively and mindfully to make sure that we're not implicating free speech rights, but we are protecting our family and putting into regulation protections that need to be there. Those are the two main issues, I would say, of many others. Obviously, I would add that Section 230, which is a piece of federal law that was put in about 2 decades ago at early stage of the internet, prevents individuals from suing social media platforms for any sort of harm. That's been a long-standing policy, which might have made sense many years ago, but today it's a reason that some of the social media platforms are not doing everything that they can to protect our children.
And I think that's true, but I also think maybe I'm more sinister at this point, but I just think there's so much money to be made. No one's come after them and their bottom line. There's been no financial ramifications for these social media platforms. They have major legislative support by major elected officials who will stop any type of reform. And all along, our kids are dying. Our kids are dying. If this were in an industry, if you went to Disney World and you had a number of kids that were constantly getting hurt on a specific ride, people would say, no way, absolutely not. This is clear. We understand it. It can't happen. But yes, we have to protect free speech, but we do not have to protect drug dealers reaching out to 16-year-olds. We do not have to protect, and Roger, please, if I don't want to speak for you, but we do not have to protect the videotaping of horrific abuse of young kids and then sharing it with others. We do not have to protect solicitation of minors and the prostitution of young kids, pornography, rape. We're coming together, and again, sometimes it needs an advocate at the level of Laura and Samuel to really sound the alarm. But we're coming together to say we will work any channel to push change.
This balanced conversation is made possible by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, Sippy and AJ Karana, and Deepwater Productions. If you're interested in furthering our mission of facilitating balanced conversations, offering real solutions, contact us at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com.
So we're joined by Roger Crystal, the inventor of Narcan nasal spray. And Roger, we've been talking a lot about the fact that these kids are online, they're buying these pills, they're not drug users really, but these pills are laced with fentanyl and other drugs. And this is a reality. And then, of course, we have opioid users across the country. We're actually talking about the fact that homes need to have Narcan in them. And you invented Narcan nasal spray. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me speak. So we have a situation which is getting worse. So the numbers are increasing day by day, month on month, and year on year. We're expecting the CDC to announce opioid overdose data for 2020 in the next quarter. But from all the provisional data that's coming out, it's dramatically worse, and the impact of COVID it shouldn't be lost on anyone in terms of its impact on mental health, therefore its impact on substance abuse, and in turn, opioid abuse. In terms of your question around the role of, I suppose, how can we save lives and prevent this? The challenge is because this opioid crisis, and that's the angle I suppose I come in on, this opioid crisis has so dramatically changed in such a rapid amount of time that it's become a very different crisis in nature compared to when it first arose. I can probably just talk you through how I see the stages, and that'll help us understand what's going on today with all these other products which are adulterated with fentanyl. So in fact, my background, you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK originally. And I started my career there as a surgeon and actually spent a lot of time in the ER for quite a few years. And to put the US in perspective, other developed nations such as the UK, France, Germany, etc., don't have an opioid crisis at all, really. I mean, they have heroin addiction, but the rates of abuse and overdose in these countries are about a fifth of what we have in the US. Put another way, prior to the arrival of OxyContin and Vicodin and et cetera, and the abuse of these medications, rates here were the same as other countries. So the US has taken off, unfortunately, and become its own entity. And originally that's because of this abuse and alleged mismarketing of opioid painkillers that created a huge population of patients addicted to opioids. Then what happened in around 20, and that was still quite recent. I mean, that's in the last decade. There's no other diseases. So apart from COVID-19, ironically, there's no other disease that suddenly arrived on the scene so fast. And then you have the was reversion back to heroin because heroin became cheaper and easier to get hold of than these opioid painkillers. And we saw heroin take over and drive the increase in opioid overdose deaths around 2015. But then in the last 3 years or so, it's become a fentanyl issue. Fentanyl is that much more addictive, that much more potent, that much more dangerous, alongside being cheaper and easier to manufacture than heroin, that it's taken over. And that's in the data where we see fentanyl now in over 3/4 of opioid overdose deaths. And it's the nature of a fentanyl overdose. It's a different beast entirely in terms of how fast it acts, how long it acts, and how little amount of fentanyl can cause such devastating harm. In fact, we are developing we developed Narcan nasal spray. I'm happy to talk all about the Narcan nasal spray, but to give you some perspective, whilst the Narcan nasal spray reverses fentanyl overdoses, it's not without a challenge. We now need multiple doses of, whether it's the Narcan nasal spray or other forms of naloxone, to reverse a fentanyl overdose. And once even if someone's initially been revived by naloxone, they can fall back into an overdose, and it's called re-narcotization because of that prolonged, potent action of fentanyl 7-8 hours down the line. So that's why it's a different situation today than even 3 years ago. And unfortunately, as the Burmans have so sadly experienced, the whole issue around fentanyl being so toxic, so potent, so dangerous that it's lacing other forms of substances as well.
So what that means is that if there's a chance your child is going to touch a marijuana cigarette, that you need Narcan nasal spray in your medicine cabinet. And I don't think that parents know that this is available without a prescription. You just have to ask your pharmacist and they'll provide it to you. We believe every infirmary and schools and camps should have it. And parents of teens need to be aware of this and go out and buy some.
But I want you to continue on that, because as I hear this, I can hear the parents saying, this is terrible. But this is not my home. This is not, you're talking about opioid users, fentanyl, it's addictive. I get it. It just doesn't apply to my family. But we're trying to make the point that it applies to every family, especially if your child's online, because there are people with these products who are reaching out to them. I mean, Laura and Samuel, Titania, Mark, somebody jump in, and can we make this relatable to the average parent watching this that still feels separated?
I'll jump in first, because it is imperative that everybody listening or watching this realize that it absolutely can be your kid. So many families, so many parents, myself included, suffer from the not my kid syndrome.
Yeah.
That's you've got to kick that to the curb right now. And the reason is this story, unfortunately, is happening every day. These issues are happening every day. This isn't just a headline to grab you and grab your attention for your time. This is a wake-up call. And at Bark, we run an annual study every year based on the data, based on the millions of children's accounts that are being monitored. And just in terms of drugs and alcohol, 78% of tweens, that's children 8 to 12, and 91.1% of teens engaged in conversations surrounding drugs and alcohol. So again, if you do not think it is your child, please think again. If it is not them, it is their peers. It is people that they know of that are being exposed to this and discussing this. And so you have to face the facts, talk with your children, and so much better to have Narcan in your medicine cabinet than to need it and not have it.
And you don't have to tell your kids you have it. A lot of parents have said to me, that kind of information means permission, or if my kids know about this, they'll think that I expect them to do drugs or that it's somehow okay. Don't tell your kids. If we had that in the house, Sammy might still be here. And to speak to the fact that this could be any child, our child did not show any signs of exploring anything. We had caught him experimenting with marijuana a month before, and we're regularly drug testing him, or he was working with a drug counselor just to make sure it didn't escalate into anything else. If when we discovered that he had experimented with marijuana, I had known about this, I would have had it in the medicine cabinet. And so the point is that they're being inundated. And it's, as Titania was talking about, it's so normalized among their peers. And they don't have to, unlike I thought, they don't have to get in touch with or find or meet a drug dealer or another kid who has drugs. They just have to be on their social media platform and get it delivered to their house like pizza. And that's what I'm hearing from parent after parent, hundreds and thousands of stories like our son and like our family, kids who were high functioning, extremely successful, families surrounding them, loving them, supporting them, whole future ahead of them, do something experimental, which pretty much every one of us did as teens, not realizing that those stupid, impulsive experiments that we did, when kids today are doing it because of the fentanyl crisis, especially, it's very likely fatal. And that's what happened to our son.
So it used to be that your kid would have to go out to a party to get in trouble. And well, now if your kid is the one that stays at home and is on the computer all the time, they can get in trouble too. And it's just coming at us from all angles as parents. So better safe than sorry. It's not your kid until it's your kid. Mm-hmm. And the reason we're here doing this is because we believe that parents don't know about the dangers of these social media platforms. Another one worth mentioning are the gaming platforms. Mm-hmm. Those are social media platforms just like Snapchat and TikTok, and they're much less regulated. And there's a lot of grooming going on those gaming platforms. They're meeting strangers. They're pretending like those strangers are really their friends because they played 100 games with them. And they're 40-year-old criminals disguising themselves as children.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. This is happening on platforms like Fortnite and Roblox all the time with particularly trafficking and sex crimes. And for parents to understand the risk here, pre-pandemic, we knew from the Organization for Social Media Safety's numbers that 5th grade and up, children were spending about 4 hours a day on average on social media. That likely grew exponentially over the course of the pandemic. We're still waiting for the new numbers. And again, pre-pandemic, we knew about a quarter of those kids had seen drugs for sale on popular social media platforms. Our best guess right now, and we're still waiting for the numbers, is that's probably tripled over the course of the pandemic, where this is a common thing where children are seeing dealers offering a whole menu of various illegal drugs for sale. our student advisors in a carefully controlled process were able to connect with drug dealers and get offered drugs within 2 to 3 minutes of searching, just so parents understand how widespread this has become, particularly over the course of the past year. It's exploded.
And they can be delivered to your house within 30 minutes.
I think you have there's a perfect in tribe sense, perfect combination of optimal supply chain and marketing, optimal marketing. So social media is the optimal way of marketing these drugs in the most covert, unidentifiable way possible. So it's hard to see unless you're the user. Other people, you can hide that. Then you add that to an optimized supply chain, meaning you can get off the dark web. It's so little fentanyl goes back, so little does so much harm, easy to hide. And so you've got that plus that, and then you've got the most dangerous product possible. Again, it's hard to identify. If this was 10 years ago, it's much harder. You can't use, I use the word imposter. You can't have heroin the imposter. You can't easily lace anything possible. Marijuana with say, OxyContin or heroin. So you've got these three factors that have suddenly arrived at the same time: the marketing, the supply chain, and the dangerous drug. And it's that adversely synergistic combination that I'm hearing is so dangerous. I just want to say two other things about Narcan, which I think also people have wrong information there. Narcan itself is entirely safe and not addictive, and you can't abuse it. If I've used it on myself just to, if you take 100 Narcan nasal sprays and if I was to squirt them up my nose, nothing dangerous would happen to me. I'll have a headache, probably feel a bit nauseous, but there's no addictive. People get it confused. It's the very opposite of being addicted. That's how it works. But I think that's important to emphasize, that this is not a dangerous medicine at all. And the other thing in terms of its affordability, people don't realize that actually if you've got insurance, there's typically a $10 copay or less. It doesn't go on your record that therefore you have an opioid problem. And it's in fact, for many plans, it's $0 copay. In some states, actually, I think the state itself funds it. So it's very affordable in general. And I don't want to, I'm happy to talk about, I won't talk about it, but I'll just say I'm happy to talk about the other aspects of this, not just the issue around fentanyl, but because of people experiencing vaping these days, the dangers, what parents aren't fully aware of the addictive, and if this is the addictive nature of cannabis today, again, compared to 20 years ago or so. So happy to talk about that, but that's what I wanted to say in the meantime.
1 in 4 young people see illicit drugs advertised for sale on social media. 34% of students report experiencing cyberbullying, and teens using social media more than 5 hours a day were found to be about 70% more likely to have suicidal thoughts. The hashtag Let Parents Protect petition is for all people who believe that parents should be the ones making decisions about whether or not they want to use third-party safety tools like Bark. Act now by signing the petition via the link in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com and help us save lives.
No, I think that summary is actually really important. It's painting the big picture of the supply, the demand, the easy access. Bark is an incredible tool. We talk about it every day, but Titania, are you guys able to monitor all social media platforms? Because right now, Dr. Berman, Samuel Chapman, they have a petition that we need. If you're a parent that has a child, just check it off. You're a parent, check in your head. Do you have a child with a cell phone? Check mark. Do you care that they are protected online? Check mark. Then please sign this petition, because they together have identified Laura and Samuel in Bark, this glaring gaping hole with Mark, this hole that we need to close the gaps until we can get legislation passed. So I give it to you, Titania, to start with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. First things first, good kids make bad choices. So it's not a matter of if, but when. Second thing is tech is not inherently bad. I love tech. Tech is a great way to communicate and consume and create content. And you can't keep your kid in a bubble and prevent them from accessing this tech. Because even if you don't let them have a smartphone or you don't let them have these apps, they can log in on friends' phones. They'll see it on the school bus. They'll use a burner phone. So those 2 points out of the way, everybody right now, I don't care what you're doing, drop it. Go to change.org/letparentsprotect. Everybody, please sign this petition. Right now, we're nearing 20,000 signatures. By the time you hear this, it will be more, but we need 1 million. We need 1 million parents and caregivers who care to make these social media platforms pay attention. Because right now, they don't have to. They're making tons of money. Nobody's holding them accountable, and children are dying every day. And if they're not dying, they're being harmed. They're being groomed. They are being cyberbullied. They are encountering suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, body image disorder issues. And the protections, in quote marks, I'm giving it air quote marks, the protections that particularly Snapchat and TikTok have in place are not adequate. TikTok, for example, I was so excited to learn they had parental controls. I activated them. On my son's end, he's 12, he turned them off. That helps no one. That helps no one, TikTok. You can do better. Snapchat, same thing. There is something called ghost mode that you can toggle on and off. I ask my son to make sure nobody can see his real-time location that he doesn't know. Sure, Mom. He turns ghost mode on. He goes somewhere else. He turns it right back on. That is not adequate parental controls. So please go to change.org/letparentsprotect. Sign the petition. And we're not asking for something crazy. We're not asking for something unmanageable. We're asking that these big tech firms let us do our jobs. You know, we're allowed to buy our kids bicycles, and thankfully we can provide them with a helmet so they can be healthier and safer. Same thing. We're getting smartphones for our children. We will let our kids download these social media apps and use them and go ahead, monetize their eyeballs, but at least let us as their parents protect them adequately, because you are not doing enough of that. You just aren't. And I'm speaking to social media companies. I'm sorry. I'm just so fired up, but I'm pissed. I'm pissed. It's not okay.
It's not okay. Lauren Samuel.
Governor Abbott this weekend said that there was 800% fentanyl across the border in Texas than there was this time last year, and that they seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the state of New York. Social media platforms are the funnels that are serving these drugs to our children. And it's time to wake up to it. That's what we're here to tell parents. Don't find out the way we did.
This is the lowest hanging fruit of protection that we can grab onto until we can make larger changes with social media. And that is to just allow parent monitoring software on the social media, on any social media platform that our children are using. That should not be too much to ask. And that's fundamentally what the petition is about.
It's up to the parents. The society at large is not going to take care of us. The social media platforms just care about how many users they get. They don't care about the health of their users. So it's back to the parents. So we need Narcan in the medicine cabinet and Bark on their kids' computer platforms.
Mark, do you have hope for legislation? What are you guys working on?
Yeah, I mean, the first step here is sign a petition and let's force the platforms to do the right thing at really no cost to the platforms. This is such an easy change for them to let Bark operate. And as a consumer protection organization, we do enthusiastically support the use of Bark. If that doesn't work, and we'll see what happens, the Organization for Social Media Safety is ready to legislate on that. We are working on it. We are working with members of Congress to get a very targeted bill out there that will make this change and potentially keep thousands and thousands of children safe. It would be a big change. And as Titania mentioned, substance abuse is one issue. There's a long list of other issues that third-party safety apps like Bark can effectively protect against, from cyberbullying to trafficking other sex crimes and self-harm and suicide, which is a big one now coming out of COVID. So there's a lot of dangers at play here, and a effective solution that can help a lot of kids.
And just to clarify this to Tanya, you have Bark on a child's phone. You have AI running in the background, monitoring everything. You see a drug dealer really posing as just a pharmacy. I want to, hey, do you want a Percocet? Do you want a Xanax? These kids don't know they're buying drugs or counterfeit pills. They don't know. You guys will get an alert in real time that then pings the parents. Just explain that one piece for us.
Sure. So it's as real time as it can be. Because we monitor over 30 social media platforms, they all have different APIs, which in layman's terms means different ways in which they respond, and our tech is pinging their tech and back and forth. So some things are real time, some things can take up to an hour, but much better than not knowing at all. And in terms of recognizing what things are called, you might not realize that when a child is talking about a school bus, they might be speaking about a Xanax bar because it's yellow and rectangular in nature. Teen text slang is a whole different ballgame. And thankfully, our algorithms are able to detect it and let you know when something seems off. There's so many different substances that children can abuse, sometimes found even within the home. Again, good kids make bad choices. And so, yes, we will alert you as soon as technically possible when your child has encountered problematic content between peers or from adults and from drug dealers looking to prey on children. These behaviors, this experimentation, this curiosity, might not always start with that immediate drug dealer outreach. You can get alerted too when they are potentially observing tutorials online. If you get an alert that they have watched a video about XYZ, that is the time to talk with them. Don't be afraid to share with them the fact that maybe you made some bad choices, but at that time, there wasn't this thing called fentanyl that could kill them. I smoked weed as a kid. It was much different back then, much different. So not here to judge you or say, don't do it because I said so. It's don't do it because it could kill you. It couldn't kill me back then.
And
I think as well, with just one thing on fentanyl, to make people aware, there are testing strips for fentanyl, but those have limited utility because the issue around fentanyl is it can be changed into related compounds such as carfentanil and other derivatizations. And that means that you can have false security by thinking, oh no, it doesn't have fentanyl, where it might have another synthetic opioid just as potent. So people need to be aware of that as well, unfortunately.
And Roger, let me ask you a question. In reading about fentanyl, people have said that the pills, there's no way to know if a pill has fentanyl, but there have been certain characteristics in these counterfeit pills or these pills laced with fentanyl. Rough edges, they tend to be blue. They might have an M30 stamp. Is this true, not true? Should we be talking to kids, even if you get a pill online?
I think again, the issue there is you have this false reassurance because it's, even if that's the case, so I'm not going to comment on specifically, can you pick out one from the other?
Yeah.
It's an arms race and there's a competitive market out there. So these dealers, these manufacturers will continue to perfect the adulteration of these drugs, of these pills. So again, there's just a don't go there approach regardless.
The drug dealers are one step ahead of us. The kids are digital natives and 100 steps ahead of us. We just have to be able to have the resources to protect them and the information and education to inform them and get ahead of it as parents. And that's the key. We're not going to be able to get ahead of the dealers. We have to get ahead in our parenting.
And this is an opportunity for the social media companies to go from a parent's nemesis to allowing a valuable conversation to happen. By allowing the Bark software onto Snapchat, we could have been talking to our son about the drugs he was thinking about taking before they ever got to him. And that sort of thing could have saved his life. And if you're running a social media company and you're not taking this action, this opportunity to be part of saving children and creating a valuable conversation instead of death, how will you sleep at night?
Pulling us all together, Laura and Samuel, we thank you so much for sharing your story and working to create a solution that honestly everybody should buy into and be a part of. Go to change.org to sign the petition. We'll have it linked on the show notes. All of us on social media are sharing it over and over and over again. I know there are 1 million parents in this country who care about the safety of their children or their neighbor's children or a friend's child. We thank you. Any last comments before we head out?
I just want to thank you because you have been such a resource and support to us and such a support in getting our message out and supporting us in getting that message out. So I'm so grateful to you and to your whole team. And, I'm just praying that we can achieve this, starting with this petition so that even if we save one child, it's worth it, and one family from the pain we've been in. But something like this could save millions.
With that, Laura, we thank you. Samuel, we thank you. To Tanya, Mark, Roger, we thank you all for being on this special episode of The Balanced Voice. We'll catch everybody next week. Thank you all.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Runya's work by following her at The Runya Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.